going over here to start the audio. Got it. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Am I excited about our program? Well, of course I am. I'm always excited, but especially today because we're going to continue our conversation as we bring you new choices and knowledge of those choices. Don't make your dreams come true with our very good friend. I'd like to consider him a good friend. Michael Goddart. He is going to share with us here on the program, in addition to much of his other work in reference to lost lives. He has a book out in that regard. We'll talk about that somewhere down the road. Mysteries of Existence Solved. We're going to talk about some of these aspects. And I think it's important to talk about some of these things. And I love the fact that we're having these conversations. Hey, thanks for joining us again. It's great to have you with us.
Richard, it's marvelous to be back and to continue the conversation. I can't wait.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the interesting things is that there are a lot of, well, I guess I could say programs, whether they're on the internet or they're on demand or the networks or what have you. You can find them all over the place. In reference to, a matter of fact, this one we're watching now is Ancient Mysteries. I think that's the name of it.
I've seen a few of
You've seen a few of those, and I have found them. I'm hoping they're fairly accurate, but I found them fascinating because of some of the concepts that they bring up, the questions, if you will, the conversations that they elicit, and it is neither plus or minus, positive or negative, in reference to these questions. It's what do you think? What do you think? Now, here's one I want to talk about in reference to our conversation today that always has fascinated me. We hear often, especially from one or two particular realms, I'll call them, of our society, that there is this process that has been called, and I'm not sure for how long, maybe hundreds or thousands of years, called evolution. And that we spring from an evolutionary process, we humans, as well as the rest of the world, the rest of the living world. And I've often wondered, okay, I'm born and I'm fed and clothed and cared for, and I grow. So there is sort of a physical evolutionary process. Then I am placed within the context of an educational system. Again, we're not saying good or bad, we're just saying. And now we're looking at a mental or intellectual evolutionary process. Now, granted, throughout all of this, we are exposed to situations and people, and we are experiencing emotions, and we're learning from them, and we're hopefully growing from them and so forth, and not getting stuck, but it happens. But even that can be considered an evolutionary process. However, when we get to the spiritual aspects of our existence, according to some, not all, there's only one way, for example, to God. In other words, there is the evolution, but there's an endpoint, and that is to be with the Creator, following the shutting down of the physical body. The evolutionary process of the physical body has ended, shut down, boom. Now I am with the Creator, and that's it. Made no sense to me because of the first three that I referenced. And with the physical body, you have, I don't know how many choices you have in terms of what you can eat and drink when it comes to sustaining the body. As far as education, I don't know how many different practices there are, different schools of thought and so forth that one can study to expand one's intellectual, shall we say, use the term consciousness? And the same thing with the emotions. But the spiritual, for some reason, there are some people who are of the school of there's a beginning and there's an ending. But I want to talk to you about your perspective on what you mean by spiritual evolution.
Well, spiritual evolution is really a subject that I would love more people to focus on because it's really why we're here. It's why we're here in the physical. It's to evolve spiritually. The epigraph in the book In Search of Lost Lives comes from Rumi, and the quote is, "It takes 1,000 stages for the perfect being to evolve." And one reason I included 88 past lives in the book, In Search of Lost Lives, was to show the process of spiritualization that was taking place life after life, all across the board. So the way I look at spiritual evolution, Richard, it's the experiences and realizations that are strengthening your higher mind so that ultimately it becomes an ally of your soul. I talk a lot about your lower mind and your higher mind. And as I mentioned in our last show, most people's dominant mind is their lower mind. They're subject to all the down-pulling passions like ego and lust and greed. So spiritualization is like learning how to be empathetic. It's all about learning how to become a good human being, refraining from violence, helping your fellow creatures, that type of thing. And so Earth is really a school. I call it the school of hard knocks because it's a very tough planet, as we can all attest to what's going on, today with the wars and the hunger and the people being displaced. The first two planets I was on, the people by and large were more spiritually evolved. They didn't commit acts of violence, as a matter of course, against animals and birds and fish. So we can take it from there. So, but so many people are unfortunately just caught up in trying to exist, make ends meet, work, but we can all carve out time in our lives to really look within and ask, what would I do if God in human form were standing here next to me? That's always a great way to look at things, or you can think of a saint that's passed. What if so-and-so were here next to me? How would I act? What would they do in this situation? So the human life really is given to us for God realization. It's as simple as that. And the better we progress, the better we can have a life next time or go all the way back to be with God. That's a distinct possibility this life, to meet one who is fully realized, who I call a fully realized master, whose consciousness is merged with God, and to learn the technique of contacting the inner word or inner sound, which is really a manifestation and emanation of the Lord.
Isn't it also presupposed, though, that one believes that there is a divine, a creator, a God?
What was the first part of your question? I missed that.
Isn't it, I don't know if this is the right word, presupposition that there is a God? I mean, one has to believe that there is one in order for us to put that into the construct that there is a creator, because there are a lot of people who do not believe that there is a quote unquote supreme being.
Right, and I think that's because they've been had all kinds of ideas and concepts that really don't jive with the reality. But the point is, I actually have a lot of respect for atheists and agnostics
Mhm.
because they haven't experienced it yet. When you pursue a spiritual path, a lot is taken on faith, and you can pursue a spiritual path without being a member of a religion while being an atheist or an agnostic. It's sort of like a show me attitude. And
Yeah.
the proof is in the pudding, to use a cliche. I mean, if you're pursuing a real spiritual path with a true master, you can look at your behavior now and then years ago when you started and see the difference. You're less attached, you're less likely to get angry, you're living on a higher plane, you're enjoying moments of grace. Now, grace is a wonderful topic we could spend the whole hour talking about. And it's one of those concepts that is difficult to define, but you can experience grace in many ways, and we can get into that as you wish. But the point I'm making is that somebody who is meditating, who's trying to say, if there's a God, show me, draw me nearer, they can experience those moments of upliftment, of being flooded with spiritual ecstasy, if you will,
Mhm.
of things happening in a way that you know you're being helped out. I mean, I was experiencing a higher presence in my life from an early age. I was literally rescued from two car accidents in uncanny ways. And I was being prepared and groomed to come on my spiritual path at an early age.
Now, we talked a little bit about this when we got together the last time in reference to our search, our spiritual path, and where it sort of began. Um, when you look back at the beginnings of your search, was it founded in this belief? And I actually want to expand that beyond belief. Was there a knowing in your heart, mind, soul, wherever? Yeah, there is a God, there is a divine, a creator, there is a supreme being, or uh, um, uh, what is the intelligent designer, shall we say?
Mm-hmm. An omniscient, yeah, creator of everything. Well, yes, there was. I had an unshakable conviction, even though I let go of my parents' religion after I turned 11. But the point is, I had been prepared for this in prior lives.
Mm-hmm.
I knew there was a path to an existence of pure bliss and immortality. I just had this unshakable conviction. And at that young age, I decided to devote myself at making that my top priority to finding it. So I was a conscious seeker from an early age. And you literally are a seeker until you become the truth. And truth, capitalized, you can use as another name for God.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, let go of any baggage you were brought up with that doesn't sit right with you. That's why in my book, I use a multiple number of names for the Supreme Being. The preferred one is one I've coined, which is called Love Source, with the L and S capitalized, because that's kind of a neutral but highly descriptive term for
I
God.
like, I like it. I like it. Yeah.
Because that supreme being is really the heart and soul of love. It's all love. The problem we experience, the reason why we experience so much suffering and agony, and everybody alive is suffering, even though they may not feel it at the moment, because they're suffering separation from their source. And to expand on this, the reason we're all suffering is that, we have a lower mind that is never satisfied. No matter what desire is fulfilled, the next one pops up immediately. And all those desires congeal, that's the verb I use, into karmas, which keep bringing us back. Here in the West, a lot of people think karma is hogwash, airy-fairy fantasy. But when you go within, you can see how karmas operate and how they're being played out.
Mm-hmm. And of course, something that comes along with karma,
Mhm.
something that is, it's probably more accepted today than maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, and that is a reincarnation,
Yes,
past
yes.
lives. And of course, you've got a whole book on yours, Searching for Lost Lives. I personally have had what's called an LBL experience where the gentleman that I worked with here in Santa Barbara, his name is Peter Wright. And he took me through a hypnosis session where I was exposed to the life before this one, right
Mhm.
before this one, which there are times when it's like, oh, that was so nice. I want to go back. You know, it was so nice. But hey, I'm here, and so forth. Is is that a prerequisite when we start talking about this subject that one must begin the process of accepting the concept of past lives along with karma? Because karma, by any other name, is still, I mean, even our scientists, if you will,
Mhm.
have used other terms to describe it. The law of cause and effect. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. I guess even from the science standpoint, Einstein. I mean, he's the one that coined that particular phrase, isn't he?
As far as I, yeah, remember.
Yeah.
But no, you don't, if karma and reincarnation don't sit right with you, that's fine. You don't have to, dwell on it. The main thing is if you want to embrace spirituality. I mean, the biggest growing segment in most Western cultures, in terms of religions, are those people who identify as spiritual, not religious. Who want to go beyond, the doctrines, the dogma, the rituals, the people who want to embrace spirit. Our true self is the soul, but the problem is we're not living simply as soul. We have a mind and we have a body, which and the mind and is knotted together with the soul. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to function on this plane. So, I mean, if you have a true heart and ardent desire to evolve spiritually, to know love source, if that exists, if you keep activating that as your highest desire, you definitely will be moved along. So, any kind of terminology that doesn't sit right with you, you can let go of that.
I have had atheists on this program,
Mhm.
and I've actually found them to be more spiritual in their description of their values, their morals, than I have seen in the actions of some folks, some people of faith.
Right.
Found that
Well,
very interesting.
yeah, well, because they're not tied to a specific belief system that unfortunately is not a living belief system. The one who first promulgated it, perhaps their exact words were not taken down. But the whole point is not to be judgmental.
No, no, no.
Everybody is burdening under a load of karma, what they're going through in life. And, you know, there are perfect phrases in the Bible like judge not that ye be judged. So rather than judge people, throw out all kinds of negative opinions, look at how you can become a better human being. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So that is sort of the process, if you will, learning to become a better human being within the context of
Mhm.
uh, a, a a spiritual evolution. And I know,
Right. And going hand in hand with doing your best to be a better human being, and I'm bringing this up, is meditation. It's like we have 24 hours in the day. How many of those hours are spent going in the direction of God? And that's the whole point of meditation, really. Uh, and if you don't feel comfortable following a teacher, you can just find a quiet, comfortable place and repeat a name, if you will, of God that feels good for you. Or not repeat any name at all, but you're calling under your cloud of unknowing to that higher power. That's the point. So um, the whole point is, I mean, time is our most valuable resource. The whole idea, in my life is to devote a tenth of my time to calling to God in my meditation.
mhm.
And
So
everybody has the sound current, the word within them. Ultimately, that can become stronger and stronger and the connection better. But to be really attuned to it, to be connected to that God stream, the audible God stream, you do need a teacher, a saint, a master, call them what you will, who can initiate you and reattune you to the life stream and teach you the rite of meditation.
I know that I am not, I'll admit it, I am not a big meditator.
Mhm.
Never have been, at least in the, we'll call it the conventional way,
Right.
where I have actually heard it put this way. And I love this because I can do this.
Mhm.
My meditation takes place, and this sounds a little weird, when I'm doing that which I love to do.
Mhm.
And this is one of those. This is an element that I love to do, and that is talking with people such as yourself, Michael, and sharing these ideas, these concepts with folks, because I don't know, it does something. It's something that it really I want to say sort of
Mhm.
feeds my soul, shall we say? You know?
Right. Well, you're very actively and consciously following a path of seeking, which really is leading you to your higher power. I mean, the majority of hosts, when we've talked about meditation, have told me, I can't sit and meditate for 2 minutes. So, and that's fine. You are where you are. And my new book, which is coming out in June, I can't share the title now, but it's really it's meditations that you can read. Let me just say that. So you can advance your spiritual evolution simply by reading these very digestible short meditations.
Well, I will look forward to that as well as the conversation we'll have about it.
Mhm.
Um, and we'll stick with meditation for just a moment. And I'm trying to recall whether this came up in our last conversation, and if it did, then we'll move on. But and you let me know. Someone I've been talking with people about meditation for years, and of course, getting their various descriptions of their methods and so forth. And I remember as a kid, or as a young adult, I should say, growing up and hearing about meditation and how you needed to, the first thing was you had to quiet the mind. You had to shut it down, so to speak, and make sure that, none of these monkey mind thoughts, got in the way, that type of thing. Right.
Mhm.
And, that was basically the perspective. That was the attitude on the part of folks, was that's what you did. Then, as I evolved, if I may use that term, as I evolved, I began to hear that there are ways of quieting the mind. But I started thinking, well, wait a minute. I mean, what? I'm a proponent of going in to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listening to that still small voice, which is, and you can pray there if you want to. We promote that as the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, where you're going to get perfect vision for you, and it's a wonderful thing. But then, I thought, what if, what if I told my mind, thinking of it as a separate entity, though I know it's not, look, I want to I want to go over here into this room, okay? And I'm going to close the door. But I'm coming back. And when I come back, I'm going to have some fun stuff for us to play with, okay? And as I'm sharing this with one of my guests recently, they said, "Well, what if you did this?" We talk about the mind as, the monkey mind, the chatter and so forth, and it's kind of like a child. What if you invited your mind to go with you with one condition? You have to be quiet. It's like a library. And you allow the mind to join you quietly while you're there. That way, the mind, like a child, feels included in the
Mhm.
process. What are your thoughts in regards to different ways in which to facilitate, shall we call it, a better or a more evolved meditation?
Well, that's one strategy you could definitely employ. I mean, we all have a mind, and it's best to know how to work for it. Actually, um, my best meditations are done when I'm working on the first draft of a book and then the second draft, because I know that the more concentrated I am, the easier it will be to write. So I'm strategizing with the mind. If I just had a day of hanging out and watching TV, which I don't normally do, or going sailing or whatever, then the mind just wants to sink into its lazy habits. So the mind really cooperates when I tell it, if you want this really difficult intuitive writing to go more easily, you're going to have to let me concentrate, and you'll actually enjoy bliss if you don't keep intruding. So it's really up to us to create our own strategies of how to talk to the mind, how to deal with it. And it can be a really obstreperous child that throws tantrums. But that's where your higher mind comes in. I mean, when you're talking to your mind, it's like, Richard, you're coming from your higher mind's place of wisdom. And I write a lot about wisdom in my most recently published book, A New Now, which we touched on a couple times in the past, where I write about the 33 wisdoms, the 11 loving wisdoms, the 11 guiding wisdoms, and the 11 evolutionary wisdoms. So that's also a great book for a seeker. It's really a whole guidebook on how to live your life.
Mm.
And can really teach you every things you need to know about the higher mind, the habitual mind, and the lower mind, and all potent strategies for dealing with them.
Well, it's to me fascinating that we have learned and we've come so far on one hand in terms of not only our understanding and awareness of who and what we are, and that's been a big one in and of itself, because quite honestly, you have to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of self in order to really know who you are, because all of those elements make you who you are today. That's why I think you'd probably agree that having regrets is a waste of time and energy, because a regret is basically saying, if only I could go back and change something. Well, guess what? You can't. You are who you are because of those events. When we talk about that aspect of our growth, our self awareness, if you will, raising our consciousness, which I suspect has something to do with the soul, or the spiritual aspect of who we are. There are some who they don't want to do that because there are too many painful, traumatic experiences, and it's not, they just don't want to go there. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance, and this is to someone who maybe is having that difficulty, that challenge. It's important that you take a look at these things, and maybe in some instances, kind of what you've already said, find someone, you can call them a therapist, what have you, who can maybe facilitate this process for you so you feel safe in doing it, in a place where you feel safe doing it, and so forth, so that you can move on. Because I think that a lot of this keeps us stuck from pursuing, when we're talking about spiritual evolution, it stops us from pursuing our life's purpose.
Well, yes, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I fully believe, and I've lived this way, you can pursue both. I've been meditating daily since the age of 19, and I was placed in an unloving, highly dysfunctional family where on a regular basis I experienced physical abuse and also sexual abuse and assault and emotional entanglement. So I started therapy at the age of 18, and I've been in different therapies most of my life. And it's been really wonderful, the whole progression of therapies. And typically the right person, the right therapy came in at the same time. So it's not like I can't, focus on my spirituality because I've had all these horrible things happen to me. Work on yourself therapeutically with those professionals you resonate with at the right time and place. And you can also pursue your spirituality. They're not at all mutually exclusive. In fact, they go hand in hand. And I don't think I would have been able to access and write about what I had if I hadn't gone through therapies. And I recovered amazing knowledge, which I footnote In Search of Lost Lives, that got revealed to me in therapy. So definitely, work on yourself as you can. Repression has its place, when it's absolutely necessary and safe, but this is your chance to grow and evolve. I mean, in the book, In Search of Lost Lives, undoubtedly my lower mind was predominant in those lives where I committed enough hurtful actions that they outweighed any good I had done. And I took my next life as an animal. And most of those animal lives were pretty tough. I mean, how many of us would like to be an animal that is, shot or with an arrow or a gun and carved up and eaten? But look at all the people being killed today. I mean, the earth is a tough place to live. And most people are so attached that if they do believe in reincarnation, they want to keep coming back. But the point I make often is no matter how wonderful you are, no matter how much good you've done, you don't know what you've done in the past, in your past lives. You don't know what you're going to have to pay off. And that's why I was so profoundly grateful I came upon my spiritual path, because the meditation is designed to evoke grace to dissolve all those past karmas. And it's called your Sinchit karmas, which is Sanskrit for your reserve karmas. So all those horrible things I did, I mean, in one past life I write about In Search of Lost Lives, I was a ruler on this planet called Vizine. And I started in a necessary war to kind of show how tough we were and how capable we were, because I was highly concerned that a more powerful country was going to invade us. So I basically 8,000 men, women, and children. And the punishment for that was beyond the beyond. So that's why, if you really want to look out for yourself, you're going to want to do something about those past karmas that have accumulated. That unless you're really highly evolved, you don't know. It's just think of having 3 mountain ranges equal to the Himalayas sitting on top of your head. Not that I want to, spare anybody, but it's just the unknown is worth exploring and doing your best to overcome it.
Fascinating. Michael Goddart is my guest. Goddart.com is the website, which we will be linked to. We encourage you to seek out this information. I personally find it fascinating. I love talking about this stuff because, of course, as always, it raises sometimes more questions than answers. But that's the whole point, is you get some answers to some questions, and then those answers give you more questions, and you just keep on going deeper and deeper, we would hope, into this process.
And if I should may jump in, and that's really what seeking is. It's asking questions and trying out things.
I want to ask, and we're going to move on to one of the other topics in just a moment. But one of the other things that I want to touch on real quickly here, in regards to spiritual evolution, I'm going to ask the questions. And you can respond to these questions either individually or collectively in terms of how they relate to this whole spiritual evolution aspect. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going?
You've asked several of the immortal questions of humankind. Well, who am I? You are the soul. That is your true identity. The true you is not your current body and mind. That's what you had to take association with to live here. And where do I come from? Originally, you came from love source, the supreme being. The supreme being sent all, seemingly infinite number of souls down here to experience the creation. And where am I going? That depends. And we've really been talking about this and around it. And what I'm going to say is actually a generalization. If you've done your best to be a good human being, you will most likely come back as a human being rather than incarnate, as I mentioned before, as an animal. And as I said, where are you going? If your hurtful actions outweigh the good, you quite likely will lose the opportunity of a human birth for I don't know how long. Now, in terms of where you're going, if you really want to leave, if you want to forego and escape suffering forever, then you would want to seek what I call a fully realized saint or master who can show you the way back. And the immortal questions have been here for all time, and they're there for a purpose. They're to allow you to evolve spiritually and to seek God or whatever you want to call that nameless source. Call it source if that feels good to you.
Mm. And the answers to those questions are somewhat, well, let me rephrase that and ask it as a question. Are the answers to those questions subjective or objective?
Well, the answer to those you can experience as truth, I would say. When you get to a certain point in spiritual evolution, and I'm talking about the regions within your consciousness, when you transcend your mind and let it go, in fact, when you've paid off all of your reserve karmas, your century karmas, then all your lives are an open book. You can see your entire journey through existence of what's called the causal or mental plane, the astral plane, and the physical worlds. I was very lucky because I was able to get to reconnect with my past lives. But the purpose of that was that I could write a book and share this with people.
Mm.
So the whole point of being a seeker is to become the truth, to know the truth, to be the truth.
And ye shall know the truth, and it will set you free, right?
That's when you become free, when you don't have to incarnate anymore, and you just exist in the endless fields of pure love and joy, which is beyond any language,
Indeed. We had Greg Braden on this program many years ago talking about one of his books uh, having to do with belief.
Mhm.
And the conversation went along the lines of how he made the comment. He said that one day, we will no longer believe, we will know.
Mhm.
You think that that's possible, that we won't need, because again, they say that beliefs are not based in fact or reality per se. They're based upon our perceptions of what we think, what we think is or will be. For example, the choices that we've made up to this point, you and I, have brought us right here where we are. And the choices that we'll make in the future will bring us to wherever it is that we're going to be in the future, to which one of my guests said yes. However, the choices that you make now are based upon your perception of what you think the future will be. What are your thoughts in terms of the difference between believing and knowing?
Well, beliefs can also be based on experience. I mean, if you're seeking a teacher, you're going to also want to, with your higher mind, with your highest state of knowing, be in touch with your experience of being with that teacher. To what extent do they have ego, or are they purely humble? So, and could you repeat the question again, because I got off on a little tangent on beliefs.
What you think the difference is between believing and knowing? Is it something that we will transcend as part of our spiritual?
Yes, thank you, absolutely. Because I mean, beliefs can take you to knowing. If you if you believe you're doing the right thing with the purest of intentions of progressing in your spiritual evolution, eventually, I mean, the end point of spiritual evolution is when you know everything, you become omniscient, and you merge in the ocean of omniscience. You lose your own identity. This is why it's so difficult for people to really get engage with spiritual evolution, because it's very much, as you progress more and more, it's all about losing your identity and to become one with love source. I mean, there are so many love stories where the person, with the earthly love, the person is so enamored and so in love with the other that they lose all sense of themselves. Yet they still have an ego, and that's why marriages can break up, because the egos don't get along. But definitely belief, the right focused beliefs can lead you to pure knowledge. They can go hand in hand.
We're talking with Michael Goddart. Goddart.com is the website, and we encourage you to go to his website. That's GODDART.com. I want to move on to the aspect of the relationship of the soul and the mind, and you kind of alluded to the combination, the pair. That it's almost as if you can't have one without the other. Is that your assessment? And talk to us about that relationship that sometimes we struggle with, especially when it comes to meditation.
Well, that's why we struggle. I mean, it's the soul and mind, as I mentioned, are knotted together, and the mind has a mind of its own. I mean, the mind is ruled by its desires, by its attachment to the senses. The soul just wants one thing. I mean, the soul is filled with longing to be back with God, to be with love source. But from all these lives we've had, and I identified in my book, In Search of Lost Lives, in terms of human lives, I've had 4,137 and millions of other lives. I mean, I've had plant lives. I mean, that's how I started out. So all these lives with this mind, which wants what it wants and wants to get what it wants, has encrusted the soul. We're really not that much in touch with the soul. We're really 99.99% mind. And those soulful moments we may experience are really much more your higher mind, which is on a higher plane.
Interesting. So, is it beneficial for us to cultivate that relationship with the mind, especially in light of the the conversation we had earlier about meditating and having a more, again, I'm not sure this is the right word, effective, or maybe beneficial is the correct usage here. A more beneficial meditation, where when we go into that meditative state, however, and so forth, we do that. That when we return to, so to speak, the real world, because one of those programs that you and I were chatting about before the program, Ancient Wisdom or Ancient Mysteries, began to allude to the fact that even this material world isn't so solid if you looked at it through a powerful enough microscope.
Well, it's all illusion. It's all false. Everything is illusory until you go back to God. But what I would encourage anyone listening is to develop a better understanding of the mind, to watch it and see where it takes you. And in an now you can, that's really a guidebook for how you can come to grips with the mind and understand it and learn how to deal with it, learn how to ask the questions you need to ask to get your best focus in life. So it's really valuable not to identify with the mind, because most people, their identity really is their mind and how, also how their body looks at the moment. And that's really kind of impeding their progress, I feel, in spiritual
Mm.
evolution. I mean, the mind is the fugitive on a lamb to have as much pleasure as possible. And that's what I call the mind, the fugitive, and the soul is the captive. It's the captive of the mind. All the soul is love and longing.
Hmm.
The mind is attached to the pleasures and all the downpulling emotions. I list many of them in my book, Spiritual Revolution. They're like over 50 names for expressions of anger, for instance, like annoyance and complaining. They're all aspects of anger. When you
Right.
meet a saint, this is someone who is beyond anger. It's just pure sweetness, pure nectar.
You think that there is a way for us as individuals to reach a point where we transcend some of these emotional, uh, I'm not even sure again what word I want to use here.
Well, downpulling tendencies or
Yeah,
traps.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, doing your best to be a good human being in meditation, those are the two wings of the bird that will take you higher and higher. So, but the mind is, you can't overestimate the power of the mind. I mean, really the mental power is what created everything in this world. And there are, rulers of the different regions, like what I mentioned before, the astral and causal region.
Hmm.
Well, it's like no being, no soul can escape until they've paid off their karma. And so the whole creation, the physical world is designed to keep you enmeshed. So it's a very difficult situation we find ourselves in. And that's why, spiritual evolution is a long, ongoing process that can take many lives. My spiritual evolution, my actual real spiritual evolution began thousands of lives ago when I was a woman with 6 children on my first planet, Shorelu. And I had a really mystical high experience I was given that really kind of awakened my soul and my higher mind to begin seeking. So, one very famous interviewer asked me if I had any idea how many past lives he had. And I said, well, what do you think? He said, well, if I believe in past lives and reincarnation, I'd say, well, maybe this is my 12th life. And I said, well, I don't know how many past lives you've had. I'm not in that place. But if my best guess in terms of what I've recovered and my experiences, I'm I would be fully believing that you've had thousands of past lives, because your whole life is about seeking and asking guest questions and seeking out the truth. So I would be surprised if you had less than 3,000 human past lives, forgetting about all the animal past lives.
And I know what you're referring to in terms of reincarnation. And yet, at the same time, would it also not be possible to say that even in this single lifetime, we will live multiple lives, i.e., as we evolve, as we grow and change? And it kind of goes back to the lyrics of a song by REM. It's the end of the world as we know it. And that phrase is true at
Mhm.
almost every moment of our lives, because change is the one constant in the universe that we cannot escape. There's no such thing as stagnation in that regard.
Mhm.
Um, and we can't go back any more than we can go back to those past lives. Now, other than maybe through a hypnosis session, and we can find out about the different past lives and learn.
Mhm.
But and in your case, that must have been a monumental process.
It just really was about the most amazing experience you
Yeah.
can imagine. But one thing I really loved about it, Richard, is how confirming it was. Because all these sanskaras I've had, and a sanskara is an impression from a past life. Like, I've had some very powerful deja vu experiences. Like when I first went to Occidental in California, where I lived close by, when I went to Hong Kong, when I went to Juhu Beach near Bombay or Mumbai. When I recovered lives, I realized I had been there very recently in my most recent and second past life. So it's very affirming. But going back to what you said initially, a lot of us have, our lives are so packed with karma, forgive the word, that it really is as if we've had multiple lives. I mean, people have had multiple marriages, and
Hmm.
you've lived in multiple locations which have been entirely different. And people have multiple jobs. It's very different from now when you were a farmer, which you have been recently, and lived in one place, and your days were pretty much the same from beginning to end for most of your life if you grew up on a farm. So
Hmm.
in a way, this is as tough and frightening as these times are. We are going through a lot of stuff and paying off a lot, I believe. So this is your opportunity to make spiritual progress. I can't emphasize that enough.
We're talking with Michael Goddart. Goddart.com is the website. Searching for Lost Lives is just one of the books that he has written. If I'm correct on the title here, The New Now, is that correct title?
Yeah, Anu now,
Yeah,
your guide to mastering wisdom daily, achieving equilibrium, and empowering your nobler self. And from my website, you can get all kinds of information, and then you can click over to Amazon if that's where you like to get your books. And I
yeah.
want to mention that a new now and an earlier book, Bliss, will shortly be available as Audible books.
Oh, wonderful. I will look forward to that because I love Audible. Now, I was listening to Audible before it was ever Audible. I
Mhm.
was in my high school years, maybe even earlier than that. And I was initially in grade school, my textbooks were large print because I was legally blind. But over the course of time, I was introduced to recordings for the blind and talking books for the blind. And that's where I was introduced to my metaphysical primer, the autobiography of a yogi. So
Mhm.
I love to listen. And when you have the right narrator, like I did for believe it or not, 1972 recording that I have on my phone of autobiography of a yogi, I tell you what, listening to it, I love the stories, but I love listening to it for the gentleman who narrated it because it takes me back to those days, those wonderful teen years that I had.
Oh, yes.
So I applaud you for having it available. I think that's fantastic. And as I said, I look forward to listening to it. We're talking again with Michael Goddart, Goddart.com, Goddart.com. That's the website we'll be linked to. We're talking today, and I'm not going to be able to get through all of them, but we'll have you back. I promise you, we're going to have you back to continue our conversation. We've already touched upon spiritual evolution. Each one of those we can only touch upon. We could spend hours, I'm sure. Relationship of the soul and mind. And I think you sort of alluded to the rules of the realms of existence at some level there. Talk to us about what realms. And by the way, I did a research on the translation from German because I was curious what the heck is a Reich and what were the first two? And I actually did find out what they were. But that's the definition of the word Reich. It's realm. So I won't use the word here, but talk to us about the rules of the realms of existence.
Right. We've actually been talking about it, Richard. I mean, in this realm, we operate under the law of action and reaction. So everything you do can create a karma. And there are three types of karma. There's your kriyaman, which is your destiny karmas for this life. And there's your pralab karmas and your sincha karmas, which are your reserve karmas. So the rules of the realms, I mean, we can divide really creation into five vast realms. You have the physical worlds, of which there are many. I mean, people know how many billions of galaxies there are. There's the astral world, which dwarfs the physical. Then there's the causal. Now, in all these three major realms, you have matter, mind, and spirit. Beyond the mental realm, you have the first spiritual realm, which has been called Par Brahm or Daswantar. That is really devoid of mind. And beyond that is another spiritual realm, which some mystics have called Banmar Gufa, means the whirling cave. And beyond that is your true home, which has been called Sachkhand. And that's like the first kind of defined realm. So really, you can also, and this is in my new book, I write about the seven heavens. I mean, the expression "I'm in seventh heaven" has been with us for a long time. I write about the seven heavens, which, starting, there's, the astral, the causal, the par brahm, the first spiritual, the Bamar Gufa, our true home. And then beyond that are advanced gradations, if you will, of God. All this is beyond language. It has to be experienced.
Mm, fascinating. Let me ask you about these realms. Obviously, as you just gave us the laundry list, so to speak, of
Right.
realms. And we are able to access them. Is there a process by which, or are we always accessing them and it's just sort of a natural state that we're in, where maybe in our dream state? That's something I've also heard said, that the world that we are in right now, that you and I are conversing in, that's not real. But when we are dreaming, that's the real world.
Well, typically dreaming, you're in the lower consciousness because when you wake up and you realize you're dreaming. So entering these higher realms is like waking up, and waking up.
Mhm.
So to access them, you have to do it through meditation. And everybody has that capacity because we have a mystical aperture at the eye center. So that's the whole idea of the meditation I do, is to still the mind and gather my mind and soul currents at my eye center and withdraw from the physical body. And as you ascend the astral chakras, eventually you reach the powerhouse of the astral world. So everybody has this possibility, but the challenge is to find the right teacher, the right who can initiate you into that meditative practice,
Mm.
which I discussed earlier.
Right. Now, that's a little, that's a challenge for me, because I have never chosen or found one individual that I followed. And I know a lot
Mhm.
of people, they do find this person. At the same time, I guess I could acknowledge that
Mhm.
maybe my teacher or teach I have multiple teachers. They maybe are through this program. Maybe it's from my metaphysical primer, Autobiography of a Yogi,
Mhm.
and that philosophy, and those people who are in there. Because I have found that philosophy, like the ocean waves on the shore, seems to come in and then go out, and then it'll come back in again over another
Mhm.
couple of years, and then it'll go out. So what about that? What if I don't feel the affinity for one individual, but I'm getting benefit, if you will, in my process,
Mhm.
my spiritual evolution, from multiple sources. I mean, I was
Yeah,
high for a year and a half, and I
yeah,
loved it.
yeah. No, I'm so glad you brought this up because that's perfectly fine. This is where you are in your seeking phase, and we have teachers all through life. Um, and the point is, if you want to find like your ultimate teacher or guide to take you within, you really don't have to be concerned with that or anxious. I mean, continue your seeking, but that power will bring you to that person.
Mm.
So you're not going to be put in contact with a teacher until it's the right time and place.
So
So I write a lot in Search of Lost Lives about my past life in England when I call that the seeker life. That was my main life of seeking, and I would go to all kinds of meetings and programs and read metaphysical books. So everything has its place and time, and it's absolutely fine if you don't feel the pull right now for a particular teacher, or you're experiencing teaching through uh, all your different guests and what rings true with you. I mean, and Yogananda had a master who initiated him, as far as I know from my research into
mhm.
the sound current.
Yeah, Sri
Uh,
Vateshwar, I believe, was his name.
yes, yes.
Yeah, and again, I love to reread that book. I'll pull it up on my phone and I'll start. I'll put the earbud in my ear. Which, by the
Mhm.
way, I never put both earbuds in. I
Mhm.
only have one in, and it's always in my right ear because I want to be able to hear the outside world in case there's some kind of warning, a siren, somebody walks up and says hello that I recognize, and so forth. I just cannot. Now, if I'm sitting, let's say here in the studio, I might put both earbuds in or both headphones over my ears,
Mhm.
and submerge myself in that way. But I love doing that, and sometimes walking. I'll go out to the beach and I'll have that book or some other book rolling in my head through the earbud. Um, I find that is such a wonderful experience. And again, I'm glad that we're going to be able to have an opportunity. Again, it's the new now is the one that's going to be audible.
Right, Bliss, which actually Bliss would be an ideal book for you or people who, don't meditate and don't particularly want to, because it's 33 simple ways you can open up your spiritual self.
Mm.
It's a beautiful book. It's fully illustrated, although the Audible won't be illustrated. But that's
Right.
that's coming out probably within 3 or 4 weeks, and then a new now is coming out as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story, and we've been talking this hour with Michael Goddart, talking about these different mysteries, if you will, that we are all curious about. In particular, he's given us five of them that he delves into in his different work, Mysteries of Existence Solved. And I hope that you will make it a point to take a look. We're going to cover the other two in our next program. Michael, I would love to have you back to talk about the journey of the soul and lost civilizations. Now, that to me is very important because it seems to me that when we talk about lost civilizations, and forgive me for even diving into this, these lost civilizations, which seems to me we would be able to find out a little bit through learning about our past lives, but that these civilizations had some of what you're talking about as part of their everyday life, and it just made life. I don't know if it made it easier, but it made it more understandable, so that they didn't get trapped in some of the things that we find ourselves in this modern day trapped in. So I look forward to our conversation in that regard.
Yes, absolutely. And particularly the civilizations from my earlier planets had what you were talking about. They had a higher knowledge of reality.
Well, that'll be exciting to talk about as well. And we look forward to having an opportunity to do just that here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm going to ask you three final questions I ask all of my guests, and whether you're a returning guest and the answers are the same or they're different, we look forward to those. But first, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Mondays at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. And we stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. We podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Amazon Music, and many other locations, too numerous to mention here. We are on YouTube, as I alluded to when I say thank you for listening to and watching. And I just received my January statistics, and both views and hours listened are 3,000, just under 3,000 views and almost 3,000 hours, I believe, of listening on YouTube. So thank you for doing so, for viewing and listening. We ask you to subscribe too, if you can, and then click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified. We ask that if you can support the work we're doing financially, we would be ever so grateful. Thank you to those who have and to those who will. Put in my email address, richard@richarddugan.com, when you go to PayPal. And also take time to go within into that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. I guarantee you will learn something about you, one way or the other. So I hope you'll do that during the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s. With all that being said, we start out with our first of three questions. Number one, who is Michael Goddart?
Michael Goddart is a mind and soul entity on his way back home, who will no longer exist once I emerge in the ocean of bliss.
What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Looking forward to meditating.
And finally, what was your best day?
What was my best day? I'd have to say the day I was initiated into my meditative practice.
And we will have to bring that up and talk about that as well a little bit more here on Tell Me Your Story. Michael, again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Richard. It's always a delight, and I just love conversing with you. All
As
the
do
best.
I hope you folks do too. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love to love. Jeanette, I am listening. Dad, continue to be happy. I am. To my dear friend, Doug, I call him Smokey. I wish I could remember why that came up, but be that as it may, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend, Zorro, aho, aho.